Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this session on the topic of what is cultural competence and cultural humility. I'd like to thank my colleague, Dr. Carolyn Montoya, who contributed to the content of this presentation. So by the end of the presentation, you will gain an understanding of the principles of cultural competence and cultural humility in the context of educating nursing students. More importantly, how to differentiate cultural competence and cultural humility. An evidence-based tool used to assess faculty cultural competence will also be discussed, and how it has been successfully used to explore nursing faculty perspectives when teaching students cultural competence. And later, during a breakout session, Dr. Montoya and I will describe ways in which to avoid stereotyping practices in the clinical or classroom setting. So the overall takeaway is that when it comes to cultural competence, particularly when engaging and teaching students, is that we all have the responsibility to reflect on our behaviors and attitudes. And that as educators and role models, we must practice cultural humility. So let's begin with how some scholars define cultural competence. Cross and colleagues define cultural competence as behaviors and attitudes utilized to work effectively in cross-cultural environments. Dr. Udo states, and I quote, "To be culturally competent doesn't mean you are an authority in the values and beliefs of every culture. What it means is that you hold a deep respect for cultural differences and are eager to learn and willing to accept that there are many ways of viewing the world." End of quote. So let's look at how Tervallen and Murray Garcia define cultural humility. They see cultural humility as a lifelong process, as having a true sense of awareness and sensitivity to other cultures. I also came across in a YouTube video created by Vivian Sanchez with Tervallen and Murray Garcia, where they go on to say how cultural humility is seen as a multidimensional concept. They conceptualize that cultural humility has three dimensions, and they are lifelong learning and critical self-reflection, to mitigate the power and balance, and also the institutional accountability. So the importance of having a true sense of awareness and sensitivity to others' cultures is critically important. Similarly, Papps and Ramsden indicate that cultural humility is having a mindset to set aside any generalizations about individuals or groups and their culture. So I thought this quote was very relevant to the topic that we're discussing today. Who dares to teach must never cease to learn. I'd like to share a short video clip that further differentiates the definitions of cultural humility.
Cultural competency and cultural humility. You may have heard these terms before, possibly in the context of healthcare settings, and not quite understood what they meant. Let's go over what these terms mean and how they apply to everyday life. To be culturally competent is to learn about other cultures, control your biases, and adapt your behaviors and communication style considering the background of people around you. The goal of cultural competency is effective and informed interaction across various cultures. At face value, cultural competency sounds ideal, but it may actually lead us to rely on generalizations about certain groups rather than recognizing the uniqueness of each individual. We also have to ask ourselves, is it realistic or even possible for people to learn everything about other cultures and become completely bias-free? That's where cultural humility comes in. To be culturally humble is to be aware of social power imbalances, respect other people's values and beliefs, and continuously reflect on your own biases. With cultural humility, there's no expectation that you memorize everything there is to know about other groups. Instead, it's a lifelong process of asking yourself how your own biases might impact the way you treat and understand others, alongside work to minimize that impact. Cultural competency is a goal, while cultural humility is a mindset. Let's go over a few ways to practice cultural humility in our daily lives. Recognize that no culture is superior to another. Become comfortable with reflecting on and acknowledging mistakes you've made. Be honest when you're not sure about something. Learn about other cultures with the awareness that you'll never reach perfect understanding. Ask the people in your life if you can have open discussions and hold each other accountable during your learning journey. The great thing about cultural humility is that it acknowledges that no one can get it right all the time. In fact, a key component of cultural humility is being open about what we haven't learned yet. Although it can feel really uncomfortable to admit when we're wrong or don't know something, that vulnerability leaves room for us to continuously learn, grow, and promote equity and inclusion in our communities.
So cultural competency is a goal, knowing we will never know everything about certain groups, whereas cultural humility is a mindset, as was depicted in the video. Being honest and recognizing that we can learn from others every day. In this slide, I like how this organization captured a great roadmap to cultural competency and cultural humility. And it's a quote from nursingcare.com. A setting, situation, and/or relationship where all differences are considered, identified, acknowledged, accepted, valued, and respected, so that strengths and skill-based effective contextual interactions are possible. End of quote. So now let's talk about an evidence-based tool that has been used successfully to measure cultural competence. The Inventory for Assessing the Process of Cultural Competence Among Healthcare Professionals is a tool developed by Campania Bacodi and designed to measure the level of cultural competence among healthcare professionals and graduate students in all the allied health fields. This tool is a pencil paper self-assessment tool that measures one's level of cultural competency in healthcare delivery. And the 5 constructs that are measured are cultural awareness, cultural knowledge, cultural skill, cultural encounters, and cultural desire. And each subscale has 5 items. And the subscales, the 5 items, are scored on a 4-point Likert type scale that ranges from 1 to 4, where they're measuring whether the participant agrees, they're knowledgeable, they're aware, they're involved, and how comfortable they are with cultural competence. So the score ranges from 25 to 100, where the highest, being culturally proficient, would be 91 to 100 in the score range, and then culturally incompetent would range from 25 to 50, and then you have your range scores in between for being culturally aware and culturally competent. And Chan and her colleagues cite in their 2009 article that various studies have developed the internal consistency reliability for this IAPCC tool with a coefficient of 0.81 for the total scale and a 0.36 to 0.75 for the 5 subscales. So a recent study using the IAPCC tool was a work by Chen and colleagues. They conducted a mixed method study to explore nursing faculty on their cultural competence and their perspectives of teaching culturally competent care to students. They used a semi-structured interview, and the questions were focusing on understanding how faculty motivated and engaged students to have a desire in developing cultural competence. Also, in identifying some teaching strategies that are used by faculty to enhance students' knowledge and skills of delivering culturally competent care. They also explored the faculty's experiences of teaching students interaction with clinically diverse backgrounds. So a couple of the sample questions asked of the faculty who participated in the study were, how do you motivate students to have a desire in learning diverse cultural this semester? And how did you teach students to recognize cultural differences? And the four major themes that emerged to address some of the barriers to teach student cultural competence were the student communication skills, the student cultural skills, some of the engaged learning, and also some of the activities that were used for practice. Some additional sub-themes that were discerned during the study was a need to create a safe place for students to ask questions. The faculty also talked about how they taught students to recognize diversity. And as role models, the faculty looked for opportunities to practice. And of course, some of the activities for practice, including case studies and class discussions. So the IAPCC survey results indicated that faculty were culturally aware and approaching cultural competence. And if we look back at the range of culturally competent, that was in the range of 75 to 90, where they rated. So in summary, it is critical for us to identify and avoid stereotyping of any culture. And I think this topic is very relevant right now because of the climate that we live in. And to value every group's differences is so important. I'll go back to Dr. Odu's words from the earlier slide, where he says to hold a deep respect for cultural differences, end of quote. But always remember the mindset and to practice with cultural humility. Thank you.
So hello and welcome everybody. I am Dr. Carolyn Montoya. I'm an Associate Dean at the College of Nursing, University of New Mexico. I want to thank Dr. Liendo for the presentation that she just completed. She did a great job talking about cultural competence and cultural humility. So what I'm going to talk about is a little bit different. It's going to be about program sustainability and stakeholder analysis. As you know, we want to increase diversity among our students in nursing, and we want to be sure that we retain, not only recruit students to come into nursing, diverse students into nursing, but we also want to retain them. And we want to retain the programs that we put in place to make them successful. So that's what this presentation is really about. It's about program sustainability and how to implement that. So when we talk about program sustainability, we have lots of programs that we run within any college of nursing. And right now I have been immersed in submitting a HRSA, Health Resources and Administration grant, that is a nursing workforce diversity grant. And I am sure that many of you out there have also been doing this work, which is due at the time of this recording. I actually have this due in the next couple of days. And part of this work that HRSA has done such a good job with is really giving opportunities for universities to enhance diversity within the College of Nursing through workforce grants. And a lot of what they look at is what we're talking about and what we want to do: recruitment, retention, and successful outcomes for diverse students. We have made a move in nursing to go to holistic admissions. I don't know about you, but when I began my nursing studies in the 70s, and I was admitted to a college, there was no holistic admissions. And truthfully, if you didn't make it in nursing school, if you didn't pass a certain skill or pass a certain test or pass a certain level, there was no remediation. There was simply you were gone. You were out. There was no effort to truly understand that learning occurs for people at different, can be different at different times. So it was simply in those years that if you were unsuccessful on a first attempt, most of the time you just were not able to continue a nursing career. Fortunately, we've come a long way from that, and now many of us have offices of student success within a College of Nursing. At the University of New Mexico, like most universities, we have strong student support systems on main campus. And the trend has now become that we also have strong student success programs within colleges of nursing to assist students to attain their goals. I'm not saying that we are taking or graduating students that are not competent. We certainly have competence across all of our students, but we have realized that students learn differently and that they may need certain accommodations if they have a disability, or simply a different strategy in terms of learning the material. We also tend to have now, more than we used to, offices of diversity, equity, and inclusion within a College of Nursing. I imagine that many of you who are attending this conference are diversity officers. And so there has definitely been a move to, again, recognize that we need that kind of leadership in terms of if we really want to change the workforce of nursing to mirror the population of our country. Student mentorship is important for students who may be coming from, in my case, I live in a very rural state with very isolated areas. And it may be that they don't know a lot of nurses in the area that they come from. And they need some mentorship in terms of how to navigate a very large university, the way that we tend to be a very large university. And then, of course, there is the recruitment, hiring, and retention of diverse faculty. And how do you go about that? In New Mexico, we are a state where we are a minority majority, in that 65% of our population is minority. And out of that, the majority are Hispanic. At our College of Nursing, as of this time, we do really pretty well with the number of diverse students we have. We're at about 50% there, but we're not so good. We're about 25% in terms of diverse faculty. Now, for some people, that may sound like a large percentage. However, when you take into account that we are 65% minority within the state, we really could do better. So what I'm going to talk about is really about how do we, when we get these programs, let's say that many of you out there are getting one of these nursing workforce diversity grants. And these are all of the things that you would need to put in place for that grant. Then the question is, this grant that this nursing workforce grant is a 4-year grant. So what do you do after 4 years? How do you sustain the efforts that you are making to increase the diversity in your student body that then completes the diversity in the nursing profession? So stakeholder is really the what and the why. You know, when you're trying to make a decision about how you're going to go about a program, you really need to take into account who is interested in this, who has a stake in it. That's why they call it stakeholder. Who is very interested in this? You need to know if that individual or group is in a position to either damage or weaken the individual or the organization. So let's take one of the examples from the previous slide, where I talked a little bit about retention, recruitment and retention of diverse faculty. Always difficult to find really the talent out there in terms of nursing faculty who are diverse. Well, who's the stakeholders there? Certainly the students are, certainly the faculty is, but you really need to look at administration. Is administration behind this? Does administration support this? It can't just be you as the diversity officer that support this. The administration, starting with your deans and your associate deans, and then perhaps the provost, or if you have a health sciences center like we do, the leadership at that point. Those people have an interest in this, and they need to back it, because if they don't back it, then it's not going to occur. So that's always something to know, is who are the leaders in there? Who may be opposing this? Do you have individuals or leaders or some other structure that would actually be opposing the decision that you're trying to make, or the initiative that you're trying to start? So, you know, that is very important to look at when you're trying to sustain your program, actually, and when you're trying to initiate the program. You want to know who has the ability to influence that direction of the organization's activities. Is it committees? Is it faculty? Who ends up being in there? And not just faculty at the College of Nursing or the School of Nursing, but what about other faculty? What about, in our case, at the University of New Mexico, we have an Office of Diversity on main campus. We're also part of a health sciences center, and we have an Office of Diversity there. So those are two groups that we can really count on in terms of assisting and wanting us to go forward with diversity initiatives. So I'm going to talk about, you know, of course, I looked a lot at the literature about stakeholder analysis, and truthfully, the majority of the literature about stakeholder analysis is done in the corporate world. You can look online and you'll find lots of examples of diagrams that talk about stakeholders, or little videos that talk about how you do this kind of work and how you influence stakeholders. But I found little to nothing on stakeholder analysis in higher education. I found this one study from 2010 from Chaplio and Sims, and this is out of the University of Portsmouth. Well, Portsmouth is in the United Kingdom. It's in England. So this is a study that was done in another country, and this was done as part of their dissertation. What they looked at is they really analyzed stakeholder management in higher education. And they conducted interviews with lots of opinion formers within the university, as you would expect, the dean, the chancellor, department heads, managers, and so forth. Actually, they identified over 30 stakeholders, and that makes sense given the hierarchy of academia. There are so many stakeholders. I'm chuckling about this because it seems to me that anytime I try to make a decision as an associate dean, I have to go through about 5 levels before I can actually say that, yes, this is the decision and this is exactly what is going to happen. So we know that academia is extremely hierarchical, and so that often makes it difficult when you're trying to get an answer to something or to go forward with a project. The interesting thing about these 30 stakeholders, what they did find is they did find 3 key factors influencing university stakeholders. And I really want to focus on the first one. It's student recruitment and satisfaction. So we really have to think, if we are trying to recruit diverse students, what is it that appeals to them? And what is it that they want to get out of that education? The interesting thing to me when I read about student recruitment and satisfaction, and some of the things that I have seen at my university, and I've also seen from advertisements from other universities, there is a lot more emphasis on student satisfaction in an interesting way. There is one set of students who want to go to a very prestigious university. And so they may select that university dependent on, that it's an Ivy League university. But there is another set of students that are asking to say, what are the dorms like? Are these dorms really nice that I can live in? What is the food service like? What are the activities? What are the sports that I can participate in? Do they have a good football team that we can really support and go to those football games? So very different, certainly from the time that I went to school to some degree. That was I was not considering dorms when I went in. Obviously, financial implications. That is really important for students in terms of how much is this education going to cost? Is it going to put me in debt that's going to take me all of my adult life to pay off? But not just for the students. You have financial implications from the leadership of whatever school or university. And then there's also what is the impact on the strategic direction of which way the university or a health sciences center is leaning? As you all, I'm sure, are aware, when you're doing your own colleges or schools of nursing strategic planning, you have to be in alignment with either your health sciences center and or the university. So that again brings in those stakeholders. So key decisions that you need to look at when you're looking at a analysis matrix, and that's what we're going to do in one of the group activities that we do, is you want to look at the identify the problem, and then again look at the stakeholders. How does this project impact the stakeholders? And what is the influence level? Is it low, medium, or high? And what is important to them? So a little bit of what we talked about before. Is it financial? Is it has to do with where the university is in terms of their research ranking? Is it important for them to be a Research 1 institution? And then also, how does the stakeholder contribute to the project? Remember, I talked about you need administration if you are really going to try to increase diversity of faculty and recruitment and retention. How important is that to your administration, and how much involved are they going to be? So one of the mistakes that can easily be made is for a diversity office or officers or committee is to go forward with a plan that has no input from leadership. If there's no input from leadership, they are not going to back that. And then what is your strategy for engaging? What is the hook? What is the hook that you're going to get someone who is very busy in administration to come and participate and be an advocate for whatever it is that you are trying to accomplish? So what we're going to do in the group breakout sessions is we're going to give you a case, a project, and have you kind of go through the process that I've just talked about in the stakeholder analysis matrix. And this tool is developed by Tools for Development, and it is licensed. And we will go through this and then have each of the groups come back, and then we will talk about it. So these are the references for this part of our presentation, and I want to thank you for your attention.